And so in Louisiana, we look at what those cost drivers are. When a claim occurs in Louisiana, why is it higher? And the two key data points there are we have above the national average, over twice the national average of filing bodily injury claims. So when we get in a wreck in Louisiana, we're twice the national average to say that we've been injured, that we've hurt our neck or our back or our head or our leg, and then we're 2.5 times the national average to litigate, to hire an attorney and sue. And anytime that you add medical costs and legal costs to a claim, it adds up. It makes it more expensive. If the claim count comes down, the cost comes down, then the premiums will follow and come down.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Joining us today is Louisiana Insurance Commissioner Tim Temple. We'll be talking about his legislative priorities for this upcoming session, and I am hoping he will be sharing some good news for policyholders as well. Before we talk to Commissioner Temple, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 12 through 14. And I have my giant Bible here for that one. All right, it says, I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks sees good in all his labor. It is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will remain forever. There is nothing to add to it, and there is nothing to take from it. For God has so worked that men should fear him. And I was reading that this morning and just thought about the fact that God has always designed us for work. He's assigned work for us from the beginning. In Genesis, Adam and Eve were instructed to cultivate the Garden of Eden, and the theme of work being the physical activity associated with the purposes of God for our lives is seen throughout the Bible. Ephesians 2:10, which is famously quoted, let me turn that off, sorry guys, tells us that we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God prepared for us in advance as our way of life. So work is the way of our life. And in today's passage in Ecclesiastes 3, King Solomon is saying that we should find happiness and satisfaction in our work because it's a gift from God. So let me challenge us all today. Are we finding happiness and satisfaction in the work that the Lord has given us? If we're not, let me just encourage you, ask him to renew your energy and passion for it. And if it becomes clear that his grace has lifted on the work that you're doing, then ask him to show you where he's calling you to next, because you are meant to find satisfaction and happiness in the work that he's put in your hands.
Yeah. And there's a difference, Danielle, as I'm sure Commissioner Temple knows and many others, between enjoying and loving what we do and recognizing that some days are, in fact, better than others. And in those moments, we have to maintain that reverential fear of God and that faith in him and that trust in him. But such a great point to ask ourselves, are we enjoying what we're doing? Are we advancing the kingdom of God? Are we in the place where he put us to be? And if we are, well, we're very blessed. And if we're not, then we need to discern where God wants us to be so we can advance his kingdom in the way that he wants us to. Speaking of someone who knows how to work hard, Commissioner Tim Temple, since he was elected not too long ago, has been working really hard and really diligently to try to get this huge barrier off the backs of Louisiana citizens with this insurance crisis. I can't tell you, everybody that I speak to, it's either number one or number two on the list of their priorities and the things that they are struggling with. The insurance rates in Louisiana across the board. Commissioner Temple has a big job and is up to the challenge, as he has demonstrated by some of the good things he's done in the past, but from some of the things that are being proposed now moving forward. Commissioner Temple, for the second time, sir, thank you so much for joining us today on the State of Freedom for a little while.
Thank you. And Chris and Danielle, please, you can call me Tim. And look, just what you were talking about just a minute ago there, I can tell you that in the role that the citizens of Louisiana have gifted me as the elected commissioner of insurance, I am certainly honored. I find honor in the job that I have. I don't always find that happiness, as we say, sometimes it's happier. And I certainly don't find, sometimes it's hard to find the satisfaction on advancing legislation as we all want to do, to make people's lives better. And, the role that I play as commissioner of insurance is to try and do that through helping make the insurance market more competitive for consumers so that they can keep more of those hard-earned wages. You mentioned working hard. I mean, the men and women of Louisiana work hard for the money that they make. And I think, as we've said on this program, and certainly I've said over the last year, there are reports that show in Louisiana, we are the least affordable state for insurance. Not only are we the most expensive, but we're the least affordable, which means that in Louisiana, a larger percentage of our wages earned go towards insurance payments than they do in other states. We are the least affordable, if that makes sense. Everybody works hard and for the money that they earn, and I want them to be able to keep more money in their pocket and go spend it where it needs to be spent, where they know, whether you're the head of your family's budget, an individual, young person just getting out on your feet into the working world, or a business trying to grow and expand. I want you to spend the least amount of money you can on insurance while buying a product that gives you protection, and you've got the consumer protection as well. But at the same time, you're not spending more than you need to, so that you can redivert those funds. And that is a daily challenge for most individuals and businesses in our state right now.
The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing around the world with the Slender Eyes drops. These homeopathic drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, help balance the body's pH, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. I've heard firsthand testimonials from droppers in their 20s to droppers in their 80s who say that the Slender Eyes drops have completely revolutionized their lives. Try the drops today to see the results for yourself. To learn more about the Slender Eyes drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at info@freedomstate.us and put drops in the subject line, or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. We also have links to those in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the state of freedom.
Yeah. And Tim, some of the initiatives that were passed last session obviously were designed to achieve just that goal, ultimately to allow us to keep more money in our pocket, less money going to insurance companies. We're not seeing an appreciable improvement at this point based upon what has gone before. But then again, as you mentioned to us on our last show, this is not the type of issue. Insurance is not something that you pass legislation and you immediately begin to see positive results from it. Sometimes these things take a while to get fully enmeshed in policy and in practice. So what are you seeing now based upon legislation that you were successfully able to get passed last session?
Yeah, and Chris, I appreciate you making that point. Insurance is slow to change, and when you make positive impacts, it takes a while for those to take effect. But I can tell you that with regards to property insurance, and we had a targeted package of bills last year that we had support of the legislature and the governor behind on the property reform, and we were able to pass substantial, monumental legislation. And we have started seeing the positive results of that. And just to give you a couple of stats, in 2024, I think we had somewhere around 25 requests for rate increase. That average increase was about 12%. I'm sorry, 6%. In 2023, we had somewhere around 55 requests for rate change, and that average was somewhere around 14%. In 2022, it was either 75 or 83 insurance companies request for rate increase, and that increase was around 23% on average. And so the number of increases, the requests are coming down, and the amount that they're asking for an increase is coming down as well. So we're starting to, it's commonly referred to as bending the curve. We're starting to bend the curve and flatten the curve.
Yeah. So
But
while
I
they're
think,
not necessarily going down yet, they're not
well,
going up either.
well, no, but they are going down. I also have 8 companies that have filed for rate decreases for 2025. So
Good
with
news.
regards to property, now, 8 is only 8 out of approximately 100 carriers that are licensed to write homeowners. But, the vast majority of the policies are written by a handful. I would anticipate that consumers can start to see either a flattening or a decrease in on their renewals, or more importantly, shop your insurance and move your carriers. Here, more so than not, is including as recently as this morning, having a conversation with a gentleman about 7 a.m., where he was telling me that he had just recently changed his insurance to a different insurance company on renewal and got a substantial rate decrease. And that was here in Baton Rouge. So there are a lot of examples of people starting to see rate decreases. It's certainly not statewide, but it is starting to filter through. And it is because of the reform that was passed last year.
And you're talking about property insurance now, right?
Property insurance,
Yeah.
homeowners insurance, as well as commercial property as well.
Are you seeing any influx in interest in providers coming to Louisiana? I knew that was a big part of what you were trying to accomplish whenever you were running, is to make sure that Louisiana attracts the kind of competition that forces policy rates to go down.
Yes, Danielle, that's a great question again. And we have 10 companies right now that have filed, that have not filed, they've gone through and have gone through the process to have the option to start writing homeowners insurance. And look, I don't want your viewers to think that means that there are 10 new companies that are willing to write today. But the fact that they have gone through the process, they filed for the forms and the rate, means they have the certificate of authority to offer homeowners business. It is an indication that the reform that we passed is working. They don't have to do that. There's, like any business, there's always expense associated when you do that, and typically you don't do that lightly. You do it with a lot of forethought. And so the fact that we have 10 companies that have gone through that process, as well as several other companies, as recently as last week, I was informed by my coworkers here that there is a company that has queried the Department of Insurance on what is the process to get a certificate of authority in Louisiana to write homeowners. And they said their intent is to go through that process. So it is working. Not only do we see companies taking rate decrease, we see new companies, new interest in our state.
And the theory being, Tim, the more competition, the better for Louisiana citizens.
Chris, exactly. That is, I have always said the best consumer protection we can have is choice. And by choice, that means if you don't like the way that an insurance company answers their phone, you can change. And you're going to change because of better pricing. If you don't like the premium you get, you can change. That's the freedom that competition brings, and the security, quite frankly, that competition brings. And we didn't have that in Louisiana, certainly not after the 12 companies went insolvent. After Laura, Delta, Zeta, and Ida, 24 to 30 companies effectively stopped writing or left the state. There was not a lot of choice anymore, but we're starting to see the beginning indications and trends that companies are interested in doing business in Louisiana once
again. Do you have a number in mind, Tim, for how many insurance companies would reasonably, in your, if you're setting goals for your office, how many new companies will it take for you to feel like we've got the level of competition we need to be able to compete with other states who have better rates that have similar conditions to Louisiana?
Yeah, I think the metric isn't so much on number of companies, but when people start to say that, I've got that choice.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very subjective metric, and again, certainly part of the role of the department and myself as commissioner is to make sure that the companies that do come do business, that they have that financial strength, they have the business plan. I hear people all the time, they say, I just want cheap insurance. But cheap insurance is not there for you when you have as we saw with the 12 companies that were insolvent. So, I want to encourage and promote companies to do business, but it also has to be at a level that's rate adequate, meaning those companies are solvent when we do have a hurricane.
Yeah.
But we can get there. It's working in Florida. It works in Alabama. It works in Mississippi, and it works in Texas. Those states all have coastal exposure. Florida certainly went through a crisis after Hurricane. They have dealt with that. Their citizens are starting to see rate decreases, and new companies do business in the state of Florida after reform. Louisiana can certainly expect and should expect the same results.
Do you expect, Tim, these companies, these 10 or so companies that we're talking about here, to be doing business in Louisiana at some point this year?
I would anticipate that they would. Again, you don't go through the application process and the policy formation, all that lightly. It's not something you just do it on a whim. So if they've gone through it, then their intent certainly is to do business sooner rather than later. That is not part of the process where they have to give us, they don't have to give us a date and say we are going to start writing policies by January 1st or anything like that. We certainly encourage and have conversations with them to promote and ask them to do business as quickly as they feel reasonable.
Yeah, and it seems the interest and the commitment are there, which are very positive sign.
Yes, sir. And that's the encouraging word that I want your viewers to take from that. Is that the signs are there, that companies are interested. And again, if you're a policyholder and and today you have two companies that might want to quote your business, when tomorrow you have 3 to 5, that's when the policyholders benefit, because that's when that competition really, if you want to sell your product, you've got to sell it on what you're offering and the price you're offering it at.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Tim, all eyes are moving toward the legislative session. There's a lot of activity ramping up in Baton Rouge. Has any legislation been filed for the upcoming session that you're promoting?
Yes, and you're right. We have April 14th, so we're just a little under 2 weeks before the regular session, which is a physical session, begins. But we have been working with legislators for many months, and quite frankly, I've been working with legislators since the day I got in office. We never stopped having conversations around what can we do to improve the marketplace. But we have a package of bills that is focused, Danielle, on addressing some of what's referred to as cost drivers. And by that, what I mean is when a claim occurs in Louisiana and a payment is made, the claim in Louisiana with regards to auto is higher than our neighboring states. It's higher than other states because we pay the highest premiums in the country. And so we've got legislation that's focused on addressing and bringing those cost drivers down. Tomorrow is the deadline at 5 p.m. I believe it's 5 p.m. when all legislation has to be filed. Once that deadline's complete and we see that list of bills and we know everything that we've got to work with, I think that Louisiana is going to be in good shape to address a lot of these cost drivers that we've talked about. I can't guarantee the legislative outcome, but I know that I am committed, as well as several handful of legislators that are committed to bringing meaningful reform to rebalance this marketplace so that people can get back to affordable auto insurance.
Yeah. Tim, when you say cost drivers, you're talking about the things that drive insurance rates up. And because Danielle and I were talking earlier before the show, anytime an insurance company has to pay more money than it thinks it should have to pay to resolve claims for whatever reason, they always pass those costs down to their policyholders, because an insurance company is not going to lose money, unless they absolutely have to. But what about the costs that cause the cost of doing business in Louisiana for an insurance company?
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest driver of that is?
Sure. And I want to answer that question, and I will. But if I can just take a step back,
Yeah.
Insurance companies, and we're talking auto. So if they're going to write your Ford F-150, they know that if that vehicle is damaged, they know they've got a lot of, actuarial tables and results. They know what it costs to repair a Ford F-150. They know what it costs to replace a Ford F-150. So there's the physical damage component of it. And then they have to model based on prior, historical data. If you're involved in an accident, what is the statistical likelihood that you're going to be injured, bodily injury? And what is the averages that they have to pay out on medical bills? What is the statistical likelihood that you're going to litigate, hire an attorney? And what do they, based on historical, what do they pay out on that? And then they set a premium based on that and a lot of other factors. the age of your vehicle, the age of you, whether you're male, female. I mean, there's a lot of data that goes in, underwriting points. And then they set a premium where they think that they can charge enough to make money to pay future claims. And when they miss that mark, when they pay more than, then they have to charge more the next year when they write that vehicle. And so in Louisiana, we look at what those cost drivers are. When a claim occurs in Louisiana, why is it higher? And the two key data points there are we have above the national average, over twice the national average of filing bodily injury claims. So when we get in a wreck in Louisiana, we're twice the national average to say that we've been injured, that we've hurt our neck or our back or our head or our leg. And then we're 2.5 times the national average to litigate, to hire an attorney and sue. And anytime that you add medical cost and legal cost to a claim, it adds up. It makes it more expensive. And the legislature had, Chris, let's see, Danielle, I think we had either 5 or 6 months where we had committee hearings. And some of those days we had 4 committee hearings during the same day. So we had, multiple committee hearings talking about the cost drivers in Louisiana, why those costs are so high. Never could get a consensus on it, as you can imagine. But we think we know what the cost drivers are and the legislation that needs to be addressed or needs to take place to address those cost drivers. I want that to come down. And if the claim count comes down, cost comes down, then the premiums will follow and come down. And it's important that your viewers understand that like you said, it doesn't happen right away. You've got to set the conditions for the cost to come down, and then the premium will follow in that competitive environment. And that's my focus. That's what we're going to focus on this legislative session, is addressing those cost drivers and rebalancing the system. There's no reason that people in Louisiana should pay the highest auto premiums in the country.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tim. And I remember you saying this on the last show, that while Louisianans per capita do not get into any more accidents than any other state, they're 2.5 times more likely to end up in court over it, which does nothing but drive everybody's costs up. And it seems like the only people who really benefit at the end of that situation are the plaintiff's lawyers. And so, but how, Tim, how do we create an atmosphere? Because how do we create an atmosphere where a person can get into an accident and the first thought in their head not be, no matter how minor? I'll just give you an example. And this is something that occurred right in my home. My son, my second oldest son, was in a fender bender accident a little over a year ago. There was no noticeable damage. He rear-ended someone at a red light going about a half a mile an hour. There was no noticeable damage to the rear of the other person's vehicle. Nobody was injured. We gave them our insurance information and didn't hear anything from anybody about the case until 2 days before prescription, 2 days before the statute of limitations would have run, allowing him to be sued. And guess what? We were served with a lawsuit alleging bodily injury and property damage and all the rest of it. And our insurance company, because they didn't want to have to go into court and litigate the whole thing and drive costs up even more, they settled the case for the policy limits, despite the fact that there was really nothing to the wreck, either in terms of property damage or bodily injury. That is the kind of situation where nobody's going to be able to tell me that cost is not going to be passed down to policyholders. Of course it is going to be passed down to policyholders. So what do we do to prevent that scenario from happening? That's the kind of case right there, Tim, where that should have been worked out between the other party and our insurance company without ever even involving a lawyer. But
Right.
Yet it is, and it does. So what accounts for that, this extraordinary litigious state that we live in?
Well, and Chris, look, I'm sorry that happened to you, because that happens to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of our citizens every year. That scenario where there was no damage. And look, the laws allow it. I mean, we have a bill, and we'll talk. I'm going to talk about a couple of different things on this topic, but we have legislation that says that if you are involved in an accident and you hire an attorney, you have to notify the person that you're suing, the insurance company, and the actual driver of the vehicle, the owner of that policy. You can't wait until in your case, 2 days before prescription period. You have to let them know so that your insurance company can actually start to interview the claimant and ask them, are you hurt? Are you seeking medical treatment? And start to review the bills that start to, all those expenses that start to incur. Because in your scenario, what happens? That person goes, they hire an attorney, they start to incur all these costs. And at the end of that period, 2 days before, they go to your insurance company and they say, here, we're going to submit a bill for $100,000. And you have 2 days, really 1 day now. You either pay it, settle it, or we're going to court. And so they don't even have time to review and look and see. So what happens? Then that plaintiff files litigation. And then the insurance company, in the way the laws are set up today, they can't even look at the bills, because we've talked about this before, the difference between the medical bill, what was billed and what was paid. And we've all seen that explanation of benefits. We see the charged amount and then what our insurance company paid the healthcare provider because of, discounts involved. Your insurance company doesn't even get the opportunity to see what was actually paid. They just get to see the worst case, the billed amount. It puts the insurance company defense team literally on the defense. They don't have the ability to go fight a fair fight in court. And that's part of the legislation that we're bringing about. One is that you have to notify, the defendant when you've hired an attorney and put them on notice. We want to make it so that the plaintiff has to show what was actually paid in addition to what was billed, so that the judge or jury can see, $100,000, and normally it's dollars way higher than that. But $100,000 might seem like a serious injury, but if you see that was only $20,000 was paid out, well, it's not so serious then. So we're trying to bring transparency, and I think that's important. I want transparency around the table. I want insurance companies to fight those fraudulent claims. I want them to have the tools to fight fraudulent claims when they're presented with them. But at the same time, I want insurance companies to pay claims when they know, when it is a serious accident and there are serious medical injuries and everything that accompanies that. I want insurance companies to step up, write a check quickly, and help the person that's been injured to recover quicker too.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of there's a lot of responsibility on both sides to help make this system in balance. And as commissioner, that's part of my role, is to hold at least the end. I can't do anything about the attorneys or the healthcare providers, but I can do my part to help make sure that the health insurance industry, if they have the proper tools to defend and litigate against fraudulent claims, to make them do that and hold them accountable.
Yeah. And you're alluding here to, I believe, Tim, HB 34 by Glorioso. Representative
Yes,
Glorioso.
that is one of several medical transparency bills.
Yeah, and it's and the scenario is this, just for the benefit of our listeners. You get to a trial, and let's say, I'll use your figure, Tim. You got $100,000 worth of medical expenses, but only $20,000 of that was paid, and so it's over with. But the jury, as of now, all they see is the original billed amount. They don't know whether that's owed. They don't know whether it's been paid. They assume it's owed, when in reality, only $20,000 was paid and nothing else is owed on it. But a jury is basing its damage award on the original $100,000 billed amount, which seems to me patently unfair. Why should the plaintiff recover special damages for medical expenses that he doesn't have to pay? That's the issue we have there. And if this legislation passes and a jury will be allowed to know what the actual amount that was paid was, then that very well could have a very good effect and probably save insurance companies a whole lot of money across the state in trials, because I don't know many juries. Juries are inclined to award what is fair and appropriate, but I don't see many juries awarding $100,000 in medical expenses if they're no longer owed, because some deal was worked out and they paid 20% of those. So I think that is important as a matter of transparency, as you said, Tim. Do you think it's got a good chance of getting through the legislature?
Look, I think it does, because we were able to pass last year it was called collateral source. This year, referring to it as medical transparency, so that more of the general population in Louisiana can understand what we're talking about. Despite the high number of attorneys we have in the state, most people still aren't attorneys. So collateral source is a legal phrase. But no, I think that we have a very high likelihood of getting a bill out. The question is going to be, Is it a bill that does something, or does it get watered down?
Yeah.
If I could, the other thing would, and I appreciate your perception and explanation, of that. I think it was done brilliantly. The other thing, and you said when those costs come down, and they're not paying the $100,000 phantom damage, but they're actually paying the $20,000 of incurred damages, and that savings, then part of the role of Commissioner of Insurance is make sure when companies are doing their rate filings, we do, to make sure that is going factored into the future years. So as losses come down, insurance companies need to pass that savings on to
And that is something
to the
very
consumer.
clearly that would go into the rate calculus, right, Tim?
Yes.
I would also think that this would be a huge deterrent to bring a lawsuit in the first place. People bring a lawsuit because they think they're going to get money out of it. In this case, in insurance claims, that's absolutely what I think.
Right. I don't see very much advertising that says, we're going to recover for you what's fair.
No.
Good point. Good. Very, very good point.
Tim, are you and the governor aligned on the way forward for insurance reform?
Danielle, that's a good question. I wish I could say, and I do, in the bottom of my heart, I wish I could say that we are aligned on that, but I have not had an opportunity to have a conversation with the governor about insurance reform in quite a while. And I look forward to the opportunity. I would welcome the opportunity to work with the governor to bring about insurance reform and balance to the system. I say that all the time. I'm not looking to run anybody out of the state. I don't want anybody, no business, to go out of business, but we've got to rebalance this system. And I would welcome the opportunity. I haven't been afforded that option yet.
Yeah. Well, Danielle's question jogged me on this. You talked about the collateral source rule, which, again, for the benefit of our listeners, it's the rule that says a victim in a car wreck does not get to benefit from any money that was paid to the plaintiff, to the person bringing the lawsuit, from some independent source. So again, we're getting back to what is actually owed by the plaintiff and what perhaps was originally billed, which can be a difference in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that a jury's sitting there thinking they need to award to a plaintiff to make him whole, when in reality they don't. But that's collateral source, and you did pass that last year, and it was vetoed by the governor. And so, there is at least some question, Tim, whether or not y'all are completely aligned on that, and whether or not his vision is the same as yours. I certainly hope that good things can happen. But if the governor is vetoing critical bills like that, it's not a good indication.
Yeah. And look, I think we both want the same outcome, people keeping more money in their pocket. I think we just have different views of how to get there. But I work and be as open and transparent and collaborative as I need to be to bring about the reform.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'd welcome that opportunity.
Well,
I'm going to ask before Danielle. Go ahead, Danielle.
I was just going to say that I would love to see these trial attorneys turn from their auto cases to real crime. We had that criminal session. We have an increased presence of law enforcement, supposedly, an emphasis on rule of law. Why don't we focus on the criminals?
You're not asking a question, but I'm going to hazard an answer anyway. I think it's not as lucrative.
Well,
there you
right.
go.
Fair enough.
Tim, if you could snap your fingers right now, two things that you could snap your fingers and would be reality in the state of Louisiana with respect to insurance, what would they be?
That's a good one. I would say the first would be that we change that with the snap of the fingers, we could change the culture of our state, and that people, when they have a claim, they go through the process of working through the claim with the insurance company. And at the end of that process, if they didn't receive the restitution that they are truly owed for whatever the actual damages, whether it's your car, your home, whatever, that if they didn't receive it, then they went through the litigation process, the legal restitution method. That would be the first one. I think the second one would be just to have for the citizens of Louisiana to have a better understanding of how insurance works and what its intent is. I think a lot of people view it, and I know, and the reason I'm saying this is because recently there was a gentleman that came from out of state and testified at, I think it was the Judiciary hearing, and he was viewing insurance almost as an investment. Like you pay and you expect some type of return out of your insurance product. And if you aren't getting what you paid, at least what you paid out in premiums, then it's a bad, it's almost like it was viewed as a bad investment. And I think a lot of people believe that. And so it would be just for people to understand, have a better understanding of how insurance works, what its intent is, to make you whole, not better. And understand that insurance is also a business, and we want them to make money. There's a lot of legislators over there that think that insurance companies making a profit is some type of bad thing, and it's not. It's a business like anybody else. They have employees, and they buy Louisiana bonds, and they pay commissions and taxes and everything else. And we want companies. I want any company, as long as it's illegal, to be profitable. So I think it would be kind of a holistic, just a general sense of people understanding, a better understanding and knowledge of the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sorry, Chris. Tim, when you came on last time, you mentioned this culture problem in Louisiana where people will want to call the trial attorney before they even call their insurance agent. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if there could be a public service project where, like a public service campaign, where insurance companies partner with your office to put up billboards, as many billboards as there are trial attorney billboards that say, call us first. We want to make things right, and let that start permeating the general psyche of people so that, I don't know, maybe it would make a difference.
Well, and Danielle, look, I'm going to give you credit for this because we did have that conversation, and it's something that we've talked about internally here at the department. If there's a way that we can, promote people letting the process work the way it's supposed to. But more important, and I have had this conversation on many stages across the country, as well as in some of the global reinsurance markets, that I want, and I've said this to insurance companies, I am, like a lot of people, I'm worn out of seeing all the various advertisements for jingles and birds, and you've got, I'm not going to call out any insurance companies by name, but Flo and Jake and Martin and Mayhem. I would, and I say this to insurance company execs, I would like you to spend more money on positive messaging. Let's see commercials about the people that called and had a successful claims resolution. Look, I'll tell you this. I was with the commissioner of Oklahoma, Glenn Mulready, just recently, the last couple, actually it was, if you remember, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks, the wildfires, those winds that were pushing the wildfires through Texas and Oklahoma. And the commissioner, we were meeting on a Sunday, and the day before, Saturday, he had been in Oklahoma, out in some of those communities where the wildfires, the winds had swept through, burned their houses down. And he said it's Saturday. He's out there talking to people. Their homes are still smoking. And the insurance company was out there handing out checks for additional living expense. The people had not even filed a claim, but the insurance company knew that they had that home insured. They knew it had burned down, and they had people on the ground handing out checks saying, we know you're going to file a claim. We know your house is destroyed. You don't have a place to stay. Here's some money so that you can at least go get a hotel room, buy some food until we start until the claims process starts working through. Those are great stories. They don't advertise that.
Yeah.
The California wildfires, I was with the commissioner of California on day 30th of the wildfires. We were at a conference, and he was speaking, and he's telling the audience, he said, I just got, confirmation. The insurance industry has paid out $7 billion paid on fire claims to Californians. And this is day 30th of the wildfire. That is a tremendous response. I don't think the federal government is efficient and effective as they are at printing money and handing it out. It seems like hand over fist. I don't think the federal government could do as good a job as the private insurance industry did. And, knowing that they had claims, I want to hear more stories like that. But I also want insurance companies to respond that way in Louisiana when we have hurricanes. Look, they did it after Hurricane Katrina and Rita back in 2005 and 6. I haven't really heard stories since then. I want companies, and I encourage and promote companies to come in, and that's why I want to reduce the regulatory burden and the legal burden so that they can do that, so that they can hand you a check and then you don't turn around and say it was bad faith because you only gave me $10,000, not $100,000 for my house on day one. We need to make sure that we create an environment that fosters that type of commitment from insurance companies to help people get on their feet as quickly as possible and not get penalized on the backside for doing it.
And that would certainly, stories like that certainly would help to facilitate greater trust, I think, in insurance companies on the part of Louisiana citizens, because
Yes.
they have been so indoctrinated, rightly or wrongly, to immediately and reflexively say, I've been in a wreck. I can't trust the insurance company, so I've got to go see the lawyer. I can't deal directly with the insurance company because they're going to screw me. That is the way many Louisianans who have claims view insurance companies in the state of Louisiana. And again, well, to the extent to which it is a right perception or a wrong perception, it's got to change in order to avoid having these cases go immediately to a lawyer and then into litigation.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a 30-year. I don't even know. I would be scared to even try and do the math on how much advertising dollars have been spent over that 30-year span to brainwash us into believing that that's the way you get fair and just compensation is by hiring an attorney. I mean, it's like I said, I don't even. I'm going to try not to even think about it because it's a staggering amount of money.
It is. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. Well, just to switch gears a little bit, you mentioned the new administration. How has your engagement been with FEMA under the Trump administration, and are we going to see any rectification of their drawing of the atrocious flood maps?
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of interaction with FEMA, with the new administration. I can tell you that in November, we had a meeting, the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. In FEMA, I think we're in FEMA District 6, which is headquartered out of Dallas. And I had reached out to actually, I was in Lake Charles and ran into the director of Region 6. And we started talking, and I asked him if he would be interested in having a meeting with all of the fellow insurance commissioners from the states that comprise his district. And he said, that's a wonderful idea. He said, I've never done that before. Had all commissioners. So we got together at a meeting in November, and we sat around a table and we had some really good conversations. And I mean, commissioners saying, fortunately or unfortunately, I haven't had an opportunity to interact with Tony. And so it was a really good way to start to create a relationship with an agency that is important in Louisiana. We do get, I think you could argue, more than our fair share of natural disasters here. So FEMA certainly plays a role. Whether it's as effective and efficient as it could be, I'll let other people argue that. I have asked, you may be aware that there's a FEMA, what is it called? FEMA Review Council.
Okay.
That the President Trump formed, and to have about 20 people sit around a table and see how can FEMA be reorganized, whether eliminated or not. I don't know what the agenda is. I've put my name in the hat to be considered for a seat on that board because I think Louisiana needs to have a voice. I haven't heard back yet on that. But look, FEMA plays a role. It always will until we find a better system. But until we find that better system, I think Louisiana needs to be engaged as we can with the FEMA leadership to make sure that when they do come and help assist Louisiana citizens, that we're making sure dollars are spent wisely, properly, and also timely.
I hope you get a seat on that because I would love for Louisiana to have a voice at that table. I think that given the Chevron doctrine being overturned, that FEMA should not be even drawing flood maps in the first place. And I would love for our state to sue on that premise. But it hasn't, to my knowledge, it hasn't happened yet. But If you know someone willing to file that suit, let us know.
I'm surprised that Louisiana hasn't done that yet, but I'll have some conversations here. But yeah, I think that, like I said, until we find a better, efficient, I am a believer. I'd like to see more of that responsibility and dollars come back to the state level. But at the same time, you've got to have some. I mean, they are until as long as they're federal dollars, you've got to have some oversight. It just doesn't need to be burdensome oversight.
Yeah. Well, Tim Temple, I know you know only too well that insurance rates in Louisiana are absolutely crushing citizens across the state, and there has to be a resolution. And hopefully, you'll be the one to deliver to Louisiana citizens. And I know they'd be indebted to you for a long time because many, many people are barely keeping their head above water right now on the insurance stuff. But before we let you go, I want to make a couple of quick announcements here. On Tuesday, we'll be back at 10 a.m., our regular time, to do our normal State of Freedom legislative preview. And we'll cover some of your bills in that, Tim. And also tonight, we are looking at 6:30 at the Courtyard Marriott in Houma for an election security meeting to determine what we need to do to fully secure Louisiana's elections. And God knows we need it, and it's time. Tim Temple, God bless you, sir, and thank you for joining us today and for your good work.
Danielle, Chris, thank y'all for the opportunity as always, and I look forward to next time, and we can give you an update on where we are legislatively.
Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.